greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
I didn't know this was a fight.
That's why you're losing.
Today we are beginning either to domesticate the devil or else to deny him. He is most powerful when he is denied.
Welcome to The Devil's in the Details. The devil may be in the details, but God is on the throne.
Amen.
So I guess framework of today's episode, it's a little bit different. It's a diversion from what we're normally doing, but I think it's important because it's something that I've seen a lot of recently. You've been in media way longer, and so you've seen the trends. I guess I'll frame it from what I'm seeing, and then we can go from there. We've talked in the past about how the enemy will tempt new converts specifically to certain pathways that would bring about their ultimate destruction because they're not ready for
or those around them. Yeah,
right. Teresa of Avila and the Interior Castle, you write about it, how you can be tempted by a good thing that is not what God is calling you to,
right?
And you'll get, or people who are in certain positions will reach these heights, and then because they're not prepared or whatever various reasons, they fall, and it causes scandal, which we see a lot. So these are like normative temptations. So my framework is I'm seeing now this interesting trend, and maybe it's been around for a while, of people in the Catholic social media space and sphere. Let's say even in media, we can go that far because it extends. They kind of walk hand in hand. Who are either new converts or reverts. And what happens is they convert or revert, have some movement towards God. And what seems to be the normative path for them now, for those just listening, I'm doing air quotes around normative path, is conversion, reversion, start a podcast,
right? Become
a public figure,
right?
Get a page and get a following,
right?
Start teaching on things that you just learned,
right?
And
maybe just learned in quotes, maybe learned,
right?
That
right.
You think you
I'm
learned.
giving too much credibility, and I call it influencer fatigue.
Yeah,
but it seems like it's happening more and more. And there's two instances. I'm not going to name any names, but there's two instances in the social media sphere, at least, where there's been scandal involved.
Right.
And I don't know. I feel like this is and I think people are catching on too, which is another reason why we're talking about it. And what do you think about this? You mentioned a guy in particular the other day when we were talking about this. Do you want to start with him, or where do you want to go?
Satan Seller.
Yeah,
it's the book he wrote. It's called Satan Seller. His name was Mike Warnke. So I was an evangelical from I don't know, time I was around 20 until 2005 when I became Catholic. And during that time, I worked in media and for an organization called Focus on the Family. And evangelicals are notorious for this pattern. All back then, there weren't podcasts or platforms. What would happen is they would write a book, they'd start doing public speaking, and then radio was the medium that I had some work in. And so Focus on the Family had one of the largest, Protestant radio reaches in the world at the time. And so they're always looking for new guests. And so this dude pops up who writes this book, Satan Seller. His name is Mike Warnke. And he is an amazing storyteller. Mm-hmm. But the problem is none of them were true. So, but of course, the evangelical world was, another, pagan converts. And and really it's more of a, aren't we, it's sort of triumphalistic. Aren't we amazing? Look who we got now, they can be actors, prominent people from outside, in the secular world. Aren't we amazing? Look who's converted now. And immediately give them a platform. And what happened at Focus on the Family was, I think there's probably 3 in when Dr. Dobson wisely said, the founder said, stop. We're not doing this anymore. Yeah. If they haven't been around for a while, they haven't been vetted, we're not having them on. Now, I want to contrast that, by the way, with EWTN, who has a theology department, dedicated people to vetting everyone who comes on. And so you're just typically not going to run into that with a much wiser approach. Now, I mean, obviously Focus got wiser and changed their approach, but
Focus on the family,
focus
not
on the
focus
family.
the Catholic
Yeah.
organization.
So,
Clear.
so I lived through all of that. There's a number of others that happened. And in the Catholic world, I think it's worse. And I'll tell you why. Is in the Protestant world, it's sort of your authority is you in the Bible. And if you're reasonably accurate in the shallow interpretations of the Bible, which are the most common in that world, then, you're somebody to be listened to. In the Catholic world, we have a much richer, much deeper, much more defined theological and philosophical tradition. And it's even more foolish in that sense.
Yeah.
As you said, I won't name names, but recently there's this person who, super bright, young, actually like them in some ways, came up in a particular corner of Catholicism and starts talking through philosophy, Thomistic philosophy, and then even talking about spiritual theology, but they're struggling a lot.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me as a spiritual director, as someone who founded a community, as someone who's been through all this, to understand why. It's because they were promoted too quickly. They didn't have spiritual maturity, that intellectual capabilities that are certainly legitimate. They had, I think, a legit conversion, but just don't have the necessary spiritual underpinnings to support them being on a platform, which and I think what the enemy loves to do is he loves to promote people like this, because he knows the analogy I always use is you're on a shaky ladder, but it looks shaky, but you start to use it and it feels incredibly solid. But why is that? Because the devil's holding it, and he wants you to get as high as you can, and then he's going to let go so that you and all your followers get taken out along with you. Another example was a young guy. I was called in so there's this community that's rising up. There's a very young, dynamic, speaker, leader, and the people under this guy were kind of like a little worried. So tried to bring me in to talk about the spiritual foundations for a community like that. And, so I met with the guy, and nobody will figure this out.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all very private. So I met with the guy and I said, well, tell me about your prayer life. Do you pray every day? Yes, I do. Where do you pray? In my car on the way to work. And I went, I didn't.
Not a good way to start.
I didn't make an outward sign of, oh no, but interiorly I'm just like, oh, this is the devil's playground, And so of course things didn't go so well in that case, but and I'll give another big example that everyone will know, and that's Father John Karapi, who was incredibly gifted speaker. That was his main forte. Incredibly gifted speaker. This one was heavily promoted by EWTN, but because he was profoundly, clearly orthodox, he was bold in his teaching. He
great voice too.
Great, orator.
Yeah.
And because I was involved in the back end of his career, if you will, I can speak to this. And I don't know if he's been laicized now. I've lost track, but last time I saw him, he was on LinkedIn trying to sell writing services or something, which made me very sad. But what happened with him, because I know something behind the scenes, is he was elevated very quickly by his order, or allowed, I should say, I don't want to accuse the order, but allowed to elevate quickly because he was Orthodox and because he was so strong. And then, because of EWTN's backing and all of that. By the way, I'm not impugning EWTN. They didn't they couldn't.
There's no way they could have known what was to happen.
Right.
Because you're almost talking about a different path, just for context's sake. One path is we have the seed on rocky ground, is what I call it.
Yeah.
They sprout quick. These are these converts, reverts.
Yeah.
And I'll speak to my own experience with this later on, but they spring up fast, but because they have no roots, the sun hits, it's called desolation.
Yeah.
And they wither away.
Yeah.
Second path you're talking about now with Karapi is you have someone who was very orthodox.
Yeah.
But because there was not it's different than the first path because something happened later.
Yeah.
That, because he was well-founded, he was teaching the truth.
Right.
This is just this is pathway 2 of the enemy for these people who are in these positions. I guess that's the warning. I don't know. Does that I don't know. Maybe that context will help.
That helps. With him, what happened was his order gave him too much room because he was so successful.
Yeah.
And so there weren't the normal kind of structures you'd have in a religious community about accountability and things. And then because of that, he slowly began behind the scenes to compromise the way he lived, which then compromised his spiritual work. But in talking with him and those who knew him behind the scenes, he never had a couple of things that are necessary for anyone coming up: accountability and spiritual maturity. Well, but what's bizarre about him in particular was nobody would ever guess that he didn't have spiritual maturity because he was
so
profoundly orthodox in his capability of communicating truth. He was dead on. So then why wouldn't he be a spiritual director? But he didn't have the foundations to be spiritually sound. So the enemy says, great, I got another one. This one's a great orator. And the other thing in this case, and I have no animus to him, and it actually sorrows me, but it's very public and everybody knows the situation. But I forgot where I was going with this.
No animus.
Yeah. So anyway, he's raised up. Oh, it was this. It's interesting. He in my opinion, put his speaking capabilities above his priesthood. And there's another figure in the Catholic world who I'm not going to name, who put the pro-life movement above his priesthood and ended up putting a dead baby on an altar at one point, which, that just, when I saw, I went, okay, we got the same fundamental issue here. A lot of talent, a lot of good, but really off because of something underlying. I don't know about that priest. I don't know much about his spiritual life. It always was good to me, and I had some personal connection with him. So when Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross or even just James in Scripture, James said, "Let not many of you become teachers, lest you incur a stricter judgment." But in their writings, it's implied. I'm not saying it's explicit, and it may be, but I haven't studied this well enough to make an assertion that you need to have a level of maturity before you begin to teach. And I think if I were to pinpoint where that would be, at least in the Carmelite tradition, it would be late purgative, where you're past habitual sin, which means you're practicing daily mental prayer, your sacramental life is rock solid. Probably in all these cases I've mentioned, their sacramental life was okay. But rarely do these folks have practice mental prayer, which Alphonsus Liguori, doctor of the church, Teresa of Avila, doctor of the church,
John of the Cross,
argue is necessary.
Yeah,
for your salvation.
Of the church, all of them are going to say it.
Yeah, is necessary for your salvation, for wisdom. But the big thing about mental prayer, in particular, being absent in the lives of these folks, is is self-awareness. That's the huge issue that happened when somebody's converted. Who's another one? I think maybe Michael Voris falls into this category. I do believe he had a radical conversion, but didn't have a lot of the necessary spiritual care, and just it elevated, needs a very strong personality. Again, another guy that I don't have any animus towards, and always treated me respectfully, even though he didn't a lot of people around me. But, I think that's the issue. I worry about Milo Yiannopoulos, I don't, did you follow him anymore?
Yeah, well, a little bit. I mean, I don't. I actually did a post not too long ago. I think he's dealing with a potential brain tumor. I think
Is he real? So he got sick.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I went back and looked at the interview that I did with him, gosh, forever ago, and I pulled a clip and I posted it, and I was really just moved. I felt it actually still makes me sad. Like I have emotions kind of welling up now, which is interesting because we only talked that one time, behind the scenes and then on the show. But it was really evident to me that he was a soul who was hurting.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Yeah.
And despite how brash he was, and despite the perverse, and I'm looking at our producer who was actually there in the room, unfortunately, at the time when that happened. It was really evident that he was searching for truth. And at the time, I knew, not a lot of people knew, that he was in the process of
converting,
coming back.
Yeah. So this guy had a male.
Yeah, he was
partner,
living a homosexual lifestyle.
But and he was explicit about it, and he even got into a little bit of trouble regarding some of the comments he made about younger.
Oh yeah. I mean, his whole thing is just
it's vile.
It's shock. It's shock factor.
Well, it's interesting with you. He didn't rattle you. He tries to rattle every guest, or he used to.
I still hold his. It's still one of the best compliments I've ever gotten from anyone. He said something along the lines of, he's like, "You're a slippery one. I can't get you." I was like, "Yeah, dude, it's not gonna happen." So what's interesting? There's two things that I really want to touch on. One, I think quickly, is it feels like you mentioned it with the evangelical world, but especially with the Catholic world, especially online. We are suckers for cult of personality.
Yeah.
And as soon as any famous person has any sort of inkling towards, I remember Kim Kardashian, of all people, wore a veil and went to like an Armenian church or something like that. And everyone was like, "Oh, this is incredible."
Well, I think also the president's wife is Melania, is an Eastern Rite.
Yeah. Something. So name the person.
Right.
And there's just this sick, I don't know what it is about.
It's cult of personality. That's our culture.
Yeah, but what is it in good people?
We want to be acknowledged as valid.
And so we're looking for it in people who are the gesture, in my opinion. I'm not, that may come off as harsh. But when I look at the totality of the world, when I see an actor, it's like, that's cool. They play a part. Okay. Yeah. They're a court gesture. They're here to entertain you.
Yeah.
Like, they're not the king. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so why am I taking, well, now I'm going to roll it back a little bit. We should want everyone to convert, right?
Yeah.
Right. But I don't take any more joy in Shia LaBeouf converting, who I like.
Yeah.
Who I think is maybe this is my own struggle with cult of personality, showing his struggles publicly, which I think is really, but still, I don't know if you saw the interview with him recently. He started crying, talking about kissing Jesus's feet.
Mm-mm.
It was beautiful, right? But also, like, we need to note that when we as in everyone listening to this, anyone who starts posting, anyone who starts commenting and saying, "Oh, this is amazing," and putting these people on a pedestal,
you got to stop.
Dangerous to their conversion.
And it's dangerous for them and the people that.
That's what I'm
them.
saying.
I'll give you a couple other examples I have, and I'll both of these are behind the scenes quiet. There was one young Black woman who started popping up on the scene, and who was into a bunch of things that aren't good, and now so I reached out privately and I said, "Can I give you a free scholarship to anything you want at the Avila Institute?" Why? Because I could tell she's wired that direction, but that, and I wanted to see if she was humble enough, and she was. I mean, she responded very well, and I hope she takes me up and continues in that. But just trying to, backfill, if you will, the interior life and the necessary protections. But I'll tell you another one that was worse, and hers wasn't bad. It's still to be seen how things work out. But this woman who was in a sauna, which is like a yoga nun, if you will, so deeply involved in non-Christian Eastern spirituality, and she came out, and I can't remember. She may have taken a course at the Avil Institute or something, and then immediately she shows up on Women of Grace. I don't know if she wrote an article for them. I don't think she was on the show, and they're very discerning over there. But I told her, because I would talk with her, and I said, "You're misrepresenting a Catholic view of what you went through." And it was so frustrating to me. I don't know why I decided to spend so much time with this person, but I spent hours on the phone with them because they had a non-Christian Eastern spiritual fundamental bunch of assumptions. I don't know how to explain it. But they had become Catholic and were rejecting it, but still had the lens of fundamental beliefs about where the power is or isn't in yoga, how it works. And they were speaking through that lens as if it was Catholic. And I was saying, it's not. I said, you don't understand. You don't understand the faith. You need to stop being public. This is the only one I ever really got to where I was explicitly said, you cannot.
You're scandalizing.
I think she was in a scholarship on Avila, and I basically kicked her out of school because she wouldn't yield. And I said, you need to be quiet.
Right.
You need to learn how to pray. You need to rewire your brain because you don't understand what you were in or what you were in before you converted or what you're in now, and you're speaking with authority.
That's and I think that's the primary pathway. So we've talked about like this actually starts before the pathway. It's convert, revert to podcast, short form, to audience, whatever, fill in the blank. I experienced this. This is what I was going to talk about. So I'm not just, this isn't me like seeing the social media space where I exist most of the time and being annoyed. This is me saying, I've been there. I know what's happening and I can predict what happens. And it's happened so many times now. My prediction is 100% accurate.
Right.
So when I had my reversion, I felt a draw. So I started getting healing from pornography and all that stuff. And I was quiet. And then what happened is one or two people popped up out of nowhere who said, because I'm very open, right? And they said, oh, I'm struggling with the same thing. And I would say, okay, well, this is what I'm doing. And so then I immediately had this temptation to say, oh, this is what I should do.
That you should talk about it.
Right. Even though at that time I was not still full. I was in the process of overcoming, but I hadn't overcome. Right. I'm in the midst of the struggle. That's the temptation. So my wife is a psychologist, and there's something, I think it's the enemy and I think it's human nature. There's something about it. She'll have people come to her who are absolute train wrecks mentally. This is not disparaging them. It's just the reality of their whatever they're dealing with. It's sad.
Yeah.
And most of the time they say, yeah, I'm also training to be a psychologist.
Or I'll tell you, there's another list that I've run into. I'm going to become a spiritual director.
Yeah. It's like, dude, you can't even.
Or I'm going to get into healing.
Yes. That's a huge thing. So what it is it's the temptation of the enemy to say, oh crap, this is serious.
Right.
They are serious about this conversion or reversion.
Yeah.
Let's distract them. Anything but God, right? That's one of the fundamental principles. And maybe you know this. I know at some point I was reading something, maybe it was in Trent or something like that. There was a prohibition. It was like, hey, we love that you're in the church. It's great that you're here.
Cállate.
Yeah. You're not allowed to say anything publicly until you're like.
No, there was a time in the church where unless you were, and I may be misrepresenting it because I've never studied it in any depth, but in my mind, there was a time in the church, unless you're a theologian appointed to teach, you don't teach. And that's why still they have degrees that essentially say you're appointed to teach, you can teach. But because the church has become so incredibly lax on discipline, doctrinal discipline and things like this, it's totally lost. It's any sort of grasp on, and and part of that's good though, in the sense that it's allowed for corruption and things to be.
Well, it's a struggle, isn't it?
Right.
I mean, in our modern time, you do need people who are rising up and talking about, like, gosh, who was the Gavin, and some of the stuff that he's talked about, or, Tim, like Flanders.
Yeah.
Name the person
Yeah.
who we like, and it's good that they're talking about these things, or they just have, a restricted interest in something,
Yeah.
and they deep dive it and no one's done it before.
Right.
Very low on the totem pole, but Saint Gemma getting
Yeah.
her diary republished.
Yeah. You did. Yeah.
That I did. And I didn't write any of it.
Yeah.
I helped get it out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, what I don't want people to think though is that it sounds like gatekeeping, because I think that's what the enemy is going to whisper into a lot of people's ears. Because if you have this desire, if you're listening to this and you're one of those people who has this desire to be in that place, none of this is condemning to you. This is what we're saying is you need to be so hyper aware, because everyone is tempted by this.
Right.
Everyone. And I would say, and actually I said this on last time I was on radio, I don't remember. Anyway, I said, I think we need to start treating these public figures like exorcists, in the sense that if you ever have a priest, you hear this from anyone in the exorcism ministry, no exorcist who is currently an exorcist wanted to be an exorcist. So if you have a priest who says, hey, I want to be involved in that,
that's the last guy you should pick.
They will tell you no.
Right.
So I think if you have a desire to be involved in this,
right,
you shouldn't be involved in it. All the people that I know, and I'll just speak for the Catholic social media sphere, who I know personally and I've talked to for hours on the phone, and I trust, and they're good folks, none of them want to be doing. I hate social media.
Yeah.
None of them want to do it.
Yeah.
The ones who I don't trust, who I've predicted were going to fall and cause
they
scandal,
love it.
They love it. And I think it's, I just think the enemy is always going to tempt anyone in those positions, not just social media, but speakers, authors, radio hosts, priests.
Yeah. Let's go back to you, by the way, your conversion,
Sure.
because I think it's a good case study. You remember, so when you had a healing with Stephanie and I at the shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament, you're coming back to the church, you're at a big event that we had with on spiritual warfare, the Abolish Summit, and you were telling everybody your story, everyone who would listen. And I don't know who pulled you aside, it might have been me or other people, and saying, hey dude, you need to turn the knob down a bit. Right.
Yeah.
And it was because we knew what was happening was a good thing. You're excited, but you were also being extremely transparent, and maybe at times too transparent, and just wanted you to calm down and settle in, and not to praise me, but and I'm not going to praise me, but I did take a very different route when I became Catholic. My first book was published in secular business before I became Catholic. When I became Catholic, I knew, I had a sense, I don't understand this space.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for me to be prominent in this space. I need to just be a pew sitter for a while. I volunteered for 2 boards, which are behind the scenes with my business expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Fellowship of Catholic University Students was one, and then the National Catholic Register was the other. And the only reason I ended up getting into the public sphere was mainly, well, one, I waited years before I did anything. And 2, there was a deeply disturbing trend in the church that nobody was addressing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to address it. But the first thing I did was put somebody else out.
A very good priest.
Say, hey, will you answer questions? I'm going to build this blog.
Yeah.
And he said yes. And then eventually, I ended up, and there were people, by the way, as I'm becoming more known, who told me, you need a Dan Burke website. And I never acquiesced to that. I did acquiesce to, when we were trying to rebuild SpiritualDirection.com to do the Way of Contemplation, YouTube page, but we've successfully revived the SpiritualDirection.com. But I hate that stuff, because it isn't about me. It's about the Lord. It's about the church. Even recently, I had a group from Trinidad. We had these women that came for a retreat given by Father Jesse Mango, and he asked me to give my testimony. I didn't want to. In one sense, I want to tell what God has done, but in another sense, it's like I have just no interest in talking about myself.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's the two-edged sword, isn't it? Because testimony is one of the most powerful means of
Right.
getting about people's conversions. What just struck me as you're telling me about this, because my pathway was similar. So I had the initial temptation and the inclination to start saying, "Oh, I want to do this," and I don't remember. It may have been you.
Yeah.
I don't know who it was, but thank God someone told me, "Sit down, shut up." No. I love you. No.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, cool. And then that was perfect for me. And I spent probably a year, I joke and call it like my hermitage year,
Yeah.
where I was just, and it was circumstance of life.
Yeah. You were
extraordinarily painful.
Yeah. You wrecked a lot of, you're just recovering.
Basically by myself. And all I did was like, okay, well, I don't know Jack, so I just need to immerse myself.
Yeah.
When I started my Instagram account, I had no goals of anything. I had my face was not on there.
Yeah.
It was, I did it honestly for me, because I was like, oh, this is this is easy. It was like a blog. So I would go into mental prayer, or I'd get some sort of quote, and then I just comment on it, and it was just like an exercise for me. And I had no intention of it becoming anything other than that. And then God had different plans, fortunately, but unfortunately it's still painful for me a lot of the time. But as I was listening to what you were saying, the first reading today in Acts, when who was it, Paul and oh gosh, I'm not remembering, but they go out. Let me just pull it up real quick.
Was it Barnabas or so?
It may have been.
Yeah.
And the people that they were going to see.
Oh, right, because he heals
them,
and it's like it's Zeus, it's Mercury,
it's Zeus and Apollo.
Yeah.
And what do? This is like the perfect example, because
they're like, no,
they're doing what God's calling them to do. People are flipping out, saying, and on his context, it's a little bit different. They thought, they're healing with gods, whatever, pagan gods, but they're saying, what do they tear their garments?
Right.
They're like, no, this has nothing to do with us.
Right.
This is about Jesus.
Right.
That's the attitude.
They're horrified.
They're horrified
that they're the ones being put on a pedestal.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and how contrary is that to today's, again, social media? That's why I hesitate to say I'm writing an article. I've started it. Every time I do this, I never finish it, but it is called influencer fatigue.
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening right now. And
the key is, I mean, what this show is about is unmasking the work of the enemy. Is one, for the listener, you need to have, you shouldn't be glomming on it. You should recognize in yourself a kind of celebrity instinct. You should recognize in yourself the need to be validated, right? Which I'm not even saying is bad, but it becomes disordered when it's like, oh, I'm valid now because so-and-so is converted. And you need to fight that. You need to fight that. And you should distrust as a disposition when somebody new pops up on the scene and they're a recent convert. You should be very cautious about following them.
Extremely.
I want to be really careful about the next example, but I'll just say I've been trying to work with someone behind the scenes who, has written about canon law, has written about, which they don't know anything about, has written about exorcists, what they should or shouldn't do, and they have no idea what they're talking about in this particular case. And a really good person. And by the way, I don't know how long, I don't know if they may have been Catholic all their life but I'm trying to have a very humble conversation behind the scenes and just say, okay, these are Catholic principles. How are you applying these in the way that you're doing this? But they're very good. They're a very good human being, motivated to protect and that sort of thing. But it's just, it's very easy to go, oh, this is what canon law says. And you read it and you think, well, it's sort of, I'll give you an illustration. One of the worst encounters with a priest I've had in terms of frustrating was this priest who was a young priest, another example, becoming very popular. Somebody's paying for a lot of video production for them, all this. and they start teaching false stuff. And in one case, they get involved in a forum that I was a manager of in a social media context, which I no longer participate in. And they made a statement about John of the Cross that was they read a particular thing that he said, and it was really clear they were not understanding of the entire corpus of John of the Cross's work.
Mhm.
And I confronted them and I said, what you said is not only untrue, but it's profoundly untrue. And John of the Cross has railed against what you said he teaches.
Right.
And I need you to recant that. And because you're a priest and people perceive you as an expert.
Right.
And he wouldn't. So I kicked him out.
Yeah.
You know, I saw him recently at an event and we were cordial and all that. But it's that kind of thing. You think you can read a canon law passage and you know canon law.
Are we just too profoundly trustworthy or trusting of our own opinions?
It is.
I can't fathom that.
It
Personally.
is prideful. It is prideful. You know, if I was ever going to make a firm proclamation in canon law, I would study it and then I would go talk to a canon lawyer and then formulate. You know, if I was going to come out and say, you know, a priest is being unfaithful to their vows or whatever, man, you want to talk about caution.
Yeah.
I would be I would talk to that priest. I would make sure I understand what they're saying.
Talk to other priests. Talk to a bishop,
but the devil loves this playground.
Yeah.
He loves to get people, good people. Every single person we've mentioned are people created for an eternal relationship of love with God. Everyone, I believe, from Karapi. I don't know about Mike Warnke. I'm suspicious there.
We're all called to be saints, right?
Right.
No matter what, God leaves 99 to get the one. He wants all of us to become saint-making machines,
right?
And share our testimony. You know, for most people, I think the majority is probably safe to say, and to profoundly impact those who are around us.
Yeah.
One of the main issues, though, is that article that you're talking about. Why write it? Right. You know, why?
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of this stuff is why do I take months in between posts at this point?
Yeah.
Because I'm not interested in what I have to say.
Right.
And I'm not going to write something and put it out there unless I feel very called and carefully that this is something that needs to be said. And truth, by the grace of God, what happens is the fruits are evident in that case. But I'm hyper careful. I'm hyper distrusting of my own opinion. I'm always seeking that kind of stuff.
And that's the fruit of prayer, by the way. Distrusting of your own opinion, because you see your frailties, you see your weaknesses, and you don't assume I can go and understand all of this stuff. And it, you know, where it particularly comes down to as well is people who come out of, let's say, the occults, think they're an expert in occult. That woman who came out of yoga, I'm an expert in yoga. Yeah. And it's like, no, you're not, because you're not Catholic enough in the way you look at where you were.
And by the way, it's all lies. So how are you saying you're an expert in lies
that
are multifaceted?
Yeah.
You know, I think it boils down, and maybe again, I know there's quite a few creators who I'm friends with who also listen to this show, and I think they would agree. And maybe some of them are on the fence, but I went through that as well. The Holy Land is what I took a particular prayer to the Holy Land when we went on pilgrimage. That was, Lord, refine my zeal.
Right.
Because I was getting to a place on social. So I was grounded and I still had a prayer life. But the next temptation was, you need to talk about everything.
Right.
You need to have an opinion on everything.
That's right.
And why? Because people are asking you to have an opinion on everything. And you and those who are listening.
And who's prompting those people?
Right. Why do I care?
Right.
And so I see this stuff now, and I got myself in, here's the funny thing. I always go back to the example of that Catholic college that called me to apologize because the people who followed at the time caused such a stink because they were having a palm reading event at a Catholic college. I'm like, and even that, it was kind of a wake up call because I was like, why are you calling me?
Right.
Like, just don't sin.
Right.
You know, right. I don't need an apology. I was just, raising the alarm. So that's like a good outcome that they canceled the event, but also, I mean, was that my place? I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it shouldn't have happened. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. But I think what happens is the other temptation is, oh, I know what happens is the other temptation is that you get to a place and everyone wants to know your opinion on everything. And you start talking about everything. And you're probably zealous, and that's probably good
Mhm.
to an extent. But you're going to start getting yourself in trouble, and you're
Yeah,
going to start
you
burning
start
bridges.
you start getting into areas that you think you know and you don't
and
know.
you're not an expert.
I've seen it. I won't say another really great human being where they got way out over their skis on a particular topic, and we're talking, and it just, and they, and this, and it, the person is brilliant, by the way, in general, but they looked so incredibly stupid because they went out talking about something that was way too far out of their realm of expertise, and they didn't study it enough. But it's in this syndrome of, I got to talk about everything because I'm a Catholic commentator.
Well, and we know too much. I think I posit that we know way more than we're supposed to know. Meaning, so I see very good people who I like,
Mhm.
who are not even problematic, but they're talking about things. Canon law is one that popped up recently. I was like, who? No one needs to know this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This does not impact your salvation. It doesn't impact your followers' salvation. Why are you talking about this? Or name the thing. It's what I want to know what God is calling. And I don't think it's that. I don't think it's canon law. And why? Because you don't need it.
Right.
For you and I don't need to know canon law in order to get to heaven.
Right.
Right. It's not necessary. We don't need to know these obscure teachings on something that's not applicable to most people. And again, two-edged sword, like the whole Iran's posture. Most people probably wouldn't know about that had it not been for Catholic social media,
Yeah.
because it was just such a big thing, not handled very well in most cases.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's good. So we're having a more reverent experience in mass, and we're not doing something. But I just, there's such a fine line between these things that like may or may not be helpful for someone,
Right.
and their experience of the faith.
Yeah.
And I think 90% of what's out there has nothing to do with actually getting people to heaven.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of what I'm
It's
seeing.
it's been interesting too about what's all that's going on now. The Catholic commentator world is, like in the secular world, there's starting to be lawsuits.
Yeah.
So I don't think I want to mention the priest's name,
Yeah.
but it is public. But there was a priest who was falsely accused and then was maligned by several Catholic commentators, and now they're being sued.
Yeah.
And whether or not I agree with them being sued, I certainly didn't agree with them maligning this, and the priest is a good priest as far as I can tell. So, that's the other thing I think about too, is, you start opening your mouth and making public proclamations about this priest X or this priest Y, but back to the whole satanic thing. Did you know, by the way, just Catholic trivia, that the devil has a favorite martial art? Did you know which one it is?
I don't. Well, he doesn't have any knees, so it's got to be pretty limited to certain movements.
You don't know which one?
No.
So judo.
Oh yeah, you don't need knees for judo.
So why is it his favorite martial art? And I'm being a little tongue in cheek, because judo uses the power and momentum of the other person against them. And he loves that. People have legit conversions, like the vast majority of the people we're talking about here, named and unnamed, and trying to not naming anyone who people don't know about, or there isn't already something public, are really good people. And he uses their energy and their zeal against them to throw them off the path and get them to focus on and do things in areas. And he's tempted you to do that. He's tempted me, and I have fallen to that temptation. So have you. And so we're just trying to warn you. So listeners to new personalities that pop up, please take it with a grain of salt and pray for them.
Yeah.
And those of you personalities are out there listening, please have a really profound prayer life. You got to have a spiritual director, and you got to have accountability. I have more accountability than anybody alive that I know of. Just people in my life who I give permission to say, you're off. It's one of the reasons I'm off social media. Is one of the folks in my own community said, you're not living according to your own standards. It was very painful. So I got off and called you and said, change the password and don't tell me the password. I'm done, but I had sinned in other ways in that context as well. So, but if you're an influencer,
which I hate that term,
you gotta have a sound prayer life.
Yeah.
And you gotta have a spiritual director. You gotta really fight for humility, because you are the enemy. And you got to examine, do you have the audience you have because the enemy gave it to you?
Yeah, that's one of the things I've written about. Is the way I start the article is, and we'll close here soon, but imagine you're in a camp. Well, first of all, imagine what sharing the gospel used to look like. Read Acts and look and see. These were people who were implicating themselves in the lives. Not necessarily possible in all cases. I do think that there's always going to be a call for people to profoundly impact those around them, immediately around them. That's your first and primary call.
Right, that's your spouse, your family, your kids.
Sure, but even your neighbors and the people,
those within your sphere of influence.
Yeah,
not digital, but
right.
Physical.
Yeah, and by the way, that's an easy fruit to check. Are you neglecting those around you for those online? If that's the case, that's disordered. You need to get offline.
Yeah.
But social media is good in the sense that it has it's a neutral. It's a net neutral. Probably more bad than good in general, but it's like morally, I think it's a net neutral.
Yeah.
But it allows you to reach places that you've never been able to, that the gospel probably has not been able to reach, or souls who may not have been able. I mean, there's stories of that all the time. I just, you really got to question, is that what God is calling you to do?
Yeah.
I mean, that was my prayer for the longest time. And I would even challenge people, if you're on the fence or you don't know, pray, Lord, if you don't want me to do this, blow it up.
Yeah, that's a great prayer.
Take it away.
Yeah, that's a great prayer.
Because if you're not, the way that for instance, maybe this will help someone. I hate social media. I despise it with a passion. I don't want to be on there. I don't want to be like, I'm still shocked when people are like, hey, do you want to come on radio or do you want to come on this podcast? And I don't get it. I don't understand it, but I can't get away from it.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's God. And, talking to you and my spiritual director and there's all sorts of external, really holy priests and stuff. But if you're yearning for it, if this is your desire, if you're not checking
to be known is a very dangerous desire.
Yeah. And
to be praised, to be known, ambition is the devil's workshop.
And for those who don't necessarily know, really look at there's some practical stuff. I can maybe in another show, maybe I'll do a post and say like, hey, if you click these 3 buttons, you can see when this person's profile popped up. Look at their editing. There's money that, there's that kind of the practical things. It's like someone's paying for that person which by the way is happening. There's quite a few creators who are that someone, I don't know who, and I've been talking to some people to try to figure it out. Someone is paying a lot of money for certain creators to blow up.
Yeah.
And that should disturb people because that's weird. It's not
natural audience building.
There's some
creating audience.
Yeah. And you may say, well, maybe they want to influence culture. And I would say, okay.
Yeah.
Still feels gross. This doesn't seem right. But watch their fruits, because each one of these examples, I'm not disparaging any of these people. There's quite a few of them that anyone listening will know. I'm not going to name them, but from the moment they jumped on the scene, I knew, and my men's group will tell you, if you ask, I predicted it, but anyone can watch the fruits.
Yeah.
You blow up quick. And, there's one woman I'm thinking of who comes from this radical background, who I met, who was super kind to me. Mm-hmm. I don't think she knew who I was or anything. So that kind of helps make it, it's like she wasn't being kind because she knows I have a following or whatever. She was just genuinely kind. But if you watch how she interacts with people online, very quickly, she started becoming an quote unquote expert. And then also very quickly, she started losing charity. And that's one of the fruits. You start losing charity with people, it's a matter of time. Now, hopefully I went through that and I got turned around. We pray that happens, but just be super cautious. And the last thing I'll say is you and I were talking about this topic after Mass. And I said, there, you could, all the writings of the saints and the doctors of the church are pretty much accessible for free online. Almost all of them. Translation issues, whatever. You could tap into this inexhaustible source of orthodox wisdom. And I do mean inexhaustible. You could never finish reading all of it before the day that you die.
That's right.
You don't need Catholic creators. You
Right.
don't need Catholic influencers. You don't need Catholic commentators.
Including us, by the way.
Including us.
Yeah.
Including us. I actually take the most joy when someone messages me and says, "Hey, you've motivated me to get rid of social media." I'm like, praise God. So so just be super cautious and
Pray for us.
and pray for us, because
for our humility, and that we listen, and that we're not the devil's zealots, as Saint Benedict spoke about, or Teresa of Avila spoke about.
Anyway, I think that pretty much well covers it.
Good.
So Romans 16:20, the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus be with you. Amen.
Amen.